In the silence of a dim wooden room, Daniel knelt on the cracked floorboards, his voice trembling as he whispered a prayer he barely believed in. A single candle flickered before him, the flame stretching unnaturally long, as though pulled by an unseen breath. The air grew dense, heavy with the metallic taste of something unnatural, and shadows danced on the walls, though no wind stirred them. Daniel said, "If there is anything beyond, show me." The floor vibrated softly, and the candle suddenly burst into cold white fire, flooding the room with blinding light. Daniel shielded his eyes, his chest tightening as if invisible hands pressed against his ribs. A towering silhouette emerged within the glow, its edges shifting like molten silver, undefined yet undeniable. No footsteps echoed, no draft touched his skin, only the weight of unseen eyes pressing deep into his being. A voice thundered within his chest, neither male nor female, both infinite and intimate. "You have been seen." Daniel's breath broke into sharp gasps, tears filling his eyes as he collapsed forward, unable to tell if he was terrified or finally found. The silence after the words was more terrifying than the sound itself, for it lingered inside him as if carved into his soul. The room lay silent after the light faded, but Daniel's heart raced as if still clutched by invisible hands. He sat trembling, staring at the candle now burning steady, its cold flame casting no warmth. His breaths came ragged, his chest aching with the memory of the voice that had shaken him to the marrow. He whispered, "What did you mean?" But no answer came. The silence was deafening, pressing in heavier than the light had. He felt madness creeping at the edge of his thoughts, wondering if he had dreamed it or if he was chosen. His palms pressed hard against the wooden floor, grounding him as sweat cooled on his skin. Daniel's tears blurred the room until only the cold flame remained clear, pulsing faintly like a living thing. Daniel wandered into the night, the cool air biting his damp skin, his thoughts racing with fear and doubt. He walked aimlessly along an empty dirt road, moonlight guiding his steps, until he saw Elijah standing at the edge of the path. Elijah, the faithful guide, had eyes that seemed to carry years of sorrow and wisdom, and his voice was calm though his presence carried weight. Elijah said, "You've been touched by something far beyond yourself." Daniel recoiled, startled by the certainty in his tone. "You don't know what I've seen," Daniel whispered harshly, his body trembling. Elijah stepped closer, his hand hovering but not touching Daniel's shoulder, his eyes steady. "I know the mark of the divine when it falls on a soul. You are not forsaken, Daniel. You've been seen." The next day Daniel sat at a small table in the town's quiet cafe, the morning sun casting long golden rays across wooden floors. Across from him sat Claire, the skeptic, her sharp eyes fixed on him with both concern and disbelief. Daniel's hands shook as he tried to explain, his voice breaking as he described the light and the voice. Claire shook her head slowly, a smirk tugging at her lips. "You were exhausted, Daniel. Sleep deprivation makes the mind play tricks. Don't throw yourself into madness." Daniel clenched his fists, anger and doubt twisting inside him. "It wasn't a dream. I felt it in my chest." Claire leaned back, arms folded, her tone clipped. "Faith doesn't make it real. Evidence does." That night, Daniel returned to his room, haunted by Claire's words, yet unable to silence the memory of the voice. The candle still burned white, unwavering, casting pale shadows across the cracked wall. He sat before it, whispering again into the silence, "Why me?" His eyes blurred as exhaustion tugged at him, and as sleep came, a faint sound stirred in the air, soft and echoing like a whisper in a vast chamber. His name was spoken, not aloud but deep inside, and the walls seemed to pulse with faint vibrations. Daniel jolted, gasping, his body rigid, realizing the presence had not left him. Daniel sat in his room, staring at the candle that still burned white, his body heavy with exhaustion. He whispered prayers, but felt no reply, only the echo of silence pressing against his chest. His thoughts spiraled into doubt, fear clawing at him as Claire's words returned like poison. He wondered if he had slipped into madness, clinging to visions that never belonged to him. The room felt colder, as though unseen eyes lingered in the corners. He pressed his palms against the floor and trembled. Daniel said, "Why me? Why now?" His tears fell freely, wetting the boards beneath him. His soul ached for clarity, yet only silence remained. The next morning, Daniel met Claire again, his eyes hollow from sleeplessness. She studied him with sharp skepticism, sipping her coffee slowly. Daniel tried to explain the feeling of the voice within him, how it branded his soul like fire. Claire shook her head firmly and said, "Your mind is betraying you. Hallucinations can feel real. It doesn't mean they are." Daniel's anger flared as he slammed his palm against the table. "You didn't hear it. You didn't feel it." Claire leaned forward, her eyes unyielding, her voice calm but firm. "Faith without proof is a dangerous path, Daniel." He turned away, shaken between defiance and despair. Later that day, Daniel wandered into the old chapel on the edge of town, its pews coated in dust, air thick with incense remnants. There he met Sarah, her eyes heavy with sorrow, kneeling alone in silent prayer. She looked up at him, recognition flashing across her worn face. Sarah said, "I know that look. I used to carry it too." Daniel asked softly, "What saved you?" Her lips trembled as she answered, "Grace. I lived years in shame, and only when I forgave myself did I begin to hear him." Her honesty pierced him deeper than any denial. Daniel realized he was not alone in carrying unseen wounds. That evening, Daniel sat with Elijah beneath the fading light of dusk. The old man's eyes were solemn as he spoke. "You've been marked, Daniel. But marks draw shadows." Daniel frowned, his chest tightening. Elijah leaned closer, his voice lowered. "There are forces that feed on your doubt, and they are watching you even now." Daniel shivered, scanning the horizon, though nothing moved but swaying trees. "What am I supposed to do?" he whispered. Elijah closed his eyes briefly and said, "Stand firm, for doubt is their weapon. Do not surrender your heart to it." The words offered hope, yet fear gnawed deeper. That night, Daniel's dreams turned heavy and strange. He found himself standing in darkness, a whisper curling around his ears. The voice was familiar, yet twisted, dripping with venom. It said, "You are nothing but broken. No light wants you." Daniel gasped, clutching his head as unseen hands pressed against his temples. Shadows moved around him, shapes stretching with sick laughter. His chest burned as fear swallowed him whole. He screamed into the void, "Leave me!" The darkness pulsed, tightening until his lungs nearly collapsed. He woke in his bed, drenched in sweat, the candle's cold flame still alive, mocking his terror. Daniel awoke with a shudder, his body trembling, the dream still clinging to him. The candle flickered cold white, its flame twisting like a serpent. Then he heard the whisper again, no longer in dream but in waking. It coiled around his mind with soft cruelty. "You want release. I can give it." Daniel froze, sweat dripping from his brow. He whispered, "Who are you?" The voice chuckled low, its sound vibrating through his ribs. "I am what waits when faith falters. Take my hand and the burden will end." Daniel's fists clenched, his body torn between longing for peace and terror at the price. Daniel stormed out into the open night, the cool air striking his heated face. His mind echoed with the whisper, promising release. Claire appeared on the path, her eyes sharp, almost triumphant at his distress. "You see? This is what obsession brings," she snapped. Daniel shook his head furiously. "It's not obsession, it's real. Something wants me." Claire scoffed, her voice biting. "Or maybe your guilt wants you." Her words pierced him, feeding the storm of doubt within. He turned from her, his fists trembling, torn between defiance and collapse. Elijah found Daniel wandering and placed a steady hand on his shoulder. The old man's eyes were calm, though his voice carried urgency. "Do not let her words undo you. Darkness thrives on cracks in your heart." Daniel collapsed to his knees, his voice breaking. "I can't fight what I don't understand." Elijah lifted his gaze heavenward. Faith is not about understanding, but about standing. Daniel's tears soaked the earth as Elijah's grip steadied him. For a moment, hope flickered faintly. Daniel stumbled into sleep again, vision swallowing him. This time the white light returned, not cold but radiant, filling him with trembling awe. A figure appeared, radiant and faceless, shimmering with silver edges that breathed like fire. The voice resonated within him. "You are not abandoned." Daniel wept, reaching out with shaking hands, though the figure remained untouchable. "Who are you?" he begged. The figure replied, "Messenger, bearer of truth. Stand, Daniel, for the darkness seeks to break you." His heart surged with both fear and yearning. The vision shifted violently, dragging Daniel into a mirror of his past. He stood within a ruined memory, his younger self screaming in despair at a betrayal long buried. The darkness whispered, "This is who you are. Broken. Guilty." Daniel's chest burned, shame rising like poison. He screamed, "No, I am more than this." His voice echoed against collapsing walls, yet the whisper laughed, shaking the dream. Tears carved down his cheeks as he realized the battle was not only against shadows, but against his own soul. Elijah sat by the fire with Daniel, the flames crackling softly. His eyes were weary, shadows etched across his face. "I have carried doubt longer than I will admit," Elijah said, his voice trembling. Daniel looked at him in shock, his mentor's confession shaking his faith further. "Even you," Daniel whispered. Elijah nodded, his hand covering his face. "Faith is not absence of doubt, it is walking through it. But I have failed more times than I've succeeded." Daniel felt both fear and comfort in the old man's honesty, realizing even guides could falter. Inside the chapel, Sarah stood trembling, her voice low as she spoke to Daniel. "I must confess something," she said, her eyes brimming with tears. "The life I left behind is darker than I let on. I betrayed someone who trusted me, and it destroyed their life." Daniel's breath caught as he listened, the weight of her shame heavy in the air. Sarah clutched the wooden pew, whispering, "I've prayed for years, but the scar never fades." Daniel's chest tightened, recognizing her struggle mirrored his own hidden guilt. He whispered, "You are not beyond grace." That evening, Claire was walking home when she saw something that froze her in place. The sky above her shifted, a luminous tear cutting across the stars. She blinked hard, gripping her coat, but it did not fade. A soft glow fell around her, undeniable, unexplainable. For the first time, her sharp logic faltered, fear breaking through her armor. Claire whispered, This can't be." She felt her throat tighten, realizing Daniel's words might not have been madness after all. The ground beneath her vibrated faintly, and she stumbled back, shaken to her core. Daniel awoke in a dream of memories long buried. He saw his own hands from years ago, pushing away a friend in anger, words of betrayal spilling from his mouth. The vision replayed with painful clarity, each sound echoing like thunder in his head. The friend's face blurred into shadow, and the voice of darkness whispered, "This is your truth. You are betrayal." Daniel shouted, "No, I was lost then. I am not that man now." His chest ached, tears streaming as he fought against the memory. The night turned violent as Daniel felt a chilling presence filling his room. The shadows thickened, pressing against the walls. From the darkness emerged a shape darker than night, towering and formless, its voice a jagged growl. "You are mine," it declared, shaking the floor. Daniel's chest locked as terror consumed him. He fell to his knees, clutching his head, desperate for light. The candle's cold flame flickered weakly, almost extinguished under the weight of the shadow. He cried, "God help me," and the air vibrated as silence battled the dark. Daniel wandered through the forest at dawn, the weight of the night clinging to him. His steps faltered, exhaustion etched into every breath. He fell against a tree, whispering, "I can't do this anymore." His body trembled, broken under fear. Yet deep within, something stirred. He remembered Elijah's words about standing even in doubt. His fists clenched as he forced himself upright, though his legs shook violently. Tears streamed down his face, his whispered prayer raw. "If you are there, don't leave me." Elijah approached Daniel later that day, his voice carrying a firmness Daniel had never heard before. "You will not surrender," Elijah commanded. His weathered face shone with defiance despite the lines of age. Daniel stared at him, confused. Elijah said, "Your fear is real, but so is your strength. Do not let darkness decide your worth." Daniel's heart pounded as Elijah's faith wrapped around him like armor. For a moment, Daniel believed. Claire sat alone in her home, staring at the glow of a lamp, her hands trembling. The memory of the sky's tear replayed endlessly in her mind. Her lips quivered as she whispered, "It was real." She buried her face in her palms, struggling to accept what she once mocked. She whispered again, Daniel wasn't lying. Her skepticism cracked, fear and wonder colliding inside her. She looked toward the window, her reflection faintly glowing in the glass, unsure if she was losing her mind or gaining truth. Sarah stood with Daniel outside the chapel, her eyes steady, though her hands trembled. "I lived my life running from guilt, but I stand here now because grace found me," she said. Daniel looked at her, heart swelling with both sorrow and hope. Sarah continued, her voice breaking, "Do not let your past bury you. If he can forgive me, he can forgive you." Daniel's tears spilled as he grasped her hands, realizing her faith was not theory but survival. That night, the force of darkness returned, filling the air with venomous laughter. "You think grace will save you? You are mine." Daniel trembled but stood taller than before, his voice shaking yet resolute. "You have no claim on me." The shadows surged forward, pressing against him, but he refused to fall. His tears burned as he whispered, "I will not be broken." The candle flared bright, defying the suffocating dark. For the first time, Daniel felt strength rise within the terror. Daniel stood in a vast dreamscape, light and shadow colliding around him. The ground cracked beneath his feet, the sky torn between radiant glow and endless void. His chest burned with fear, but he knew this was the final test. The voice of the force of darkness slithered through the air, whispering, "You will fail as you always have." Daniel's fists clenched, trembling as sweat poured down his face. He shouted, "I am not yours," but his voice cracked with weakness. Suddenly, a soft glow appeared behind him, steady and warm. He turned to see the divine messenger, its silver light cutting through the darkness. The messenger's voice filled him. "Stand." Daniel drew a ragged breath, feeling strength pulse faintly within him. Elijah prayed alone in his small room, the candle burning low. His heart was heavy, his lips quivering as he whispered, "Lord, I believe. Help my unbelief." The silence that followed felt like a blade. He pressed his hand against his chest, tears sliding down his lined face. For the first time, Daniel's struggle mirrored his own. Elijah clenched his jaw, raising his head. "If he falls, I will not," he vowed, his body trembling. Yet the flicker of doubt still gnawed at him, reminding him that even faith could feel fragile. His prayer ended with a whisper, "Do not let me fail him." Claire sat in the quiet of her home, the memory of the glowing tear in the sky replaying in her mind. Her rational world crumbled as she stared at her hands shaking. "It was real," she whispered, her voice trembling with fear. She pressed her palms together, though she had never prayed before. "If there is something beyond me, show me." Her body shuddered as warmth spread through the room, faint and undeniable. Tears filled her eyes, her breath catching. For the first time, she could no longer deny Daniel's truth. Sarah stood outside the chapel, the cool night air wrapping around her. Daniel approached, his face pale with exhaustion. She placed her hands on his shoulders, her eyes steady. "I will not let you stand alone," she said, her voice breaking. Daniel's eyes brimmed with tears as she continued, "I carried guilt for years, but I will face it again to protect you." He shook his head, whispering, "You don't have to." Sarah smiled faintly, tears glistening. "I choose to." The ground beneath them trembled, shadows curling along the chapel walls. The final confrontation erupted as Daniel stood in his room, the force of darkness towering above him. Its shadow stretched across every wall, its voice a roar of venom. "You are broken beyond repair." Daniel's body shook violently, his knees nearly buckling. Yet the candle flared, glowing brighter than ever. He shouted, "I will not bow." The messenger's light burst through the room, colliding with the shadow in a storm of fire and silver. The air shook with violent energy, sparks of dark and light clashing. Daniel fell to his knees, screaming both in pain and in release. The battle raged within and around him, his soul the battlefield. Daniel collapsed in the dreamscape, the echoes of the battle still raging. His body trembled as he saw visions of every guilt and shame replaying like ghosts. His younger self accused him, voices of betrayal screamed, but then a warmth covered him like a mantle. The divine messenger appeared, its form glowing brighter than ever. "You are forgiven," the voice resonated. Daniel wept, his body collapsing forward as light bathed him. His heart opened fully for the first time, shame loosening its grip. The shadows faded, leaving him trembling but free. The messenger stood before Daniel, its form shimmering like living silver. "Your journey has not been to prove your strength, but to reveal your need," it said. Daniel lifted his head, eyes flooded with tears. "Then I am weak," he whispered. The messenger replied, "And in weakness you are found." Daniel reached out, but the messenger faded into a rising glow. His chest filled with both grief and awe, realizing the divine presence had marked him forever. Claire walked through the forest at dawn, her breath visible in the cold air. She found Daniel standing beneath the trees, his face wet with tears yet glowing with peace. She whispered, "I believe you." Daniel turned, his lips trembling into a faint smile. "Not me," he said softly, "but what spoke through me?" Claire nodded, her skepticism broken. The silence around them felt holy, the air charged with something unseen. Elijah stood near the chapel steps, watching Daniel approach. His eyes brimmed with tears, his weathered face shining in the morning light. "You have stood," Elijah whispered. Daniel placed a hand on his mentor's shoulder, shaking his head. "Not by myself." Elijah's chest heaved with both relief and humility, realizing faith had carried them both. He lifted his hands in silent blessing, his soul finally at peace. That evening, Daniel returned to his room, where the candle still burned cold white. He knelt before it one last time, no longer trembling, but calm. His voice was steady as he whispered, "I have been found." The silence that followed was not empty, but filled with presence, heavy and warm. He closed his eyes, tears slipping down his cheeks, not of fear but of peace. The flame steadied, glowing brighter, illuminating the cracks of the room with a soft silver hue. Daniel bowed his head, knowing the journey was not the end but a beginning.